Wait. It's Spencer. Spencer's here.
Spencer is set to lead the Yellowstone Dutton Ranch in a battle against formidable adversaries to turn the tide and continue the legendary saga of the Dutton family. Spencer and his beloved Alex have finally reunited, embracing each other tightly.
Spencer!
Seeing his wife in such a weakened state, Spencer, without hesitation, swept Alex into his arms and ran with all his might. Even in this moment, he didn't forget to crack a joke, remarking that he had once carried a several hundred-pound elk for miles, so Alex's weight was nothing in comparison. Rewinding 24 hours, Alex found herself stranded in the desolate, snowy wilderness. Heavy snow had blocked the roads, and as far as the eye could see, there was no sign of civilization. The car had run out of gas, and she had no food left. The bitter cold had already claimed the lives of the couple traveling with her. Alex struggled to move, her limbs severely frostbitten, pushing her to the brink of despair. At this time, her husband, Spencer, was still on the train heading back to Montana. He had already entered the state, and the ranch he held so dearly in his heart, Yellowstone, was drawing near. Yellowstone ranch owner Jacob, along with the remaining cowboys and Montana law enforcement officers, were waiting with grim anticipation at the train station. Spencer was now the only hope for the Yellowstone family, and their enemies would undoubtedly try to eliminate him at the station, preventing him from ever reaching the ranch alive. Jacob and the sheriff had to ensure Spencer's safety at all costs. The fate of Yellowstone Ranch and Spencer were now intertwined. If Spencer returned home alive to lead the fight, Yellowstone would surely prevail. Conversely, if their enemies succeeded at the train station, Yellowstone Ranch would be destroyed in an instant. Banner, Yellowstone's greatest adversary and the wealthy businessman's top enforcer, was increasingly feeling like he had taken the wrong path. The longer he worked for the businessman, the more he sensed the man's terrifying nature. The Yellowstone family had provoked no one. It was Banner who had initiated the conflict, and Yellowstone's retaliation had led to the subsequent events. But the businessman was different. He killed without hesitation, ending lives casually over the slightest of matters. The businessman was the true devil. Banner's son was growing up, and he witnessed his father's complicity in wrongdoing. Banner had begun to have second thoughts. He wanted to set a positive example for his son and could no longer aid the businessman's reckless actions. So, he told his wife to take nothing but cash. He planned to leave Montana before the businessman and the Yellowstone family went to war, wanting no part in the conflict. Jacob was still anxiously awaiting Spencer's train at the station. He knew assassins hired by the businessman were likely lying in wait. Sure enough, he looked up and saw Banner, the businessman's top enforcer, appearing with his wife and child. Banner had purchased 3 train tickets. He intended to take his family and flee this dangerous situation, but Jacob stopped him. It wasn't going to be that easy. Banner had led the bloody attack on the Yellowstone family, and John had died at Banner's hand. Banner had not yet faced justice. There was no way Jacob would let him leave so easily. Banner told Jacob that the businessman had sent 2 groups of assassins. One was lying in ambush at the train station to deal with Spencer, and the other was already on their way to Yellowstone Ranch. If things went as expected, Yellowstone Ranch would cease to exist after today. He sincerely advised Jacob to escape while he still could. This information was crucial, but Jacob was resolute. He would stand or fall with Yellowstone Ranch. His only hope was that the 5 remaining cowboys at the ranch could withstand the assassin's attack. Although Banner seemed genuinely remorseful, Jacob could not possibly let him leave, so Banner reluctantly agreed to stay. However, he pleaded with Jacob to allow his wife and child to board the train and leave. If something happened to him, Banner begged Jacob to look after his family. Jacob agreed to this request. Banner immediately put the cash into his wife's bag, instructing his wife and child that there would be a gunfight soon. He told them that no matter what they saw or heard, even if they saw him shot and fall, they must not look back, but head straight onto the train and leave. The assassins attacking Yellowstone Ranch had already gathered. Their orders were to launch an immediate assault on the ranch, leaving no one alive, regardless of age or gender.
We're waiting for a signal.
No signal.
Start killing then.
Upon arriving at Yellowstone Ranch, this group of attackers once again split into 2. One group dismounted and approached the ranch on foot, while the other drove directly towards it. Only 5 cowboys remained at Yellowstone Ranch. 2 of them were positioned as lookouts on the perimeter. Noticing that his partner had fallen asleep, one of the cowboys promptly woke him with a thrown stone.
Stay that way. You silly when we get back.
The group of assassins on foot had already drawn near. Seeing the overwhelming number of their opponents and their aggressive approach, the cowboy didn't dare to engage in a prolonged fight. He shot one of them down and then immediately turned and ran back to Yellowstone Ranch to raise the alarm. Kara was still inside the house. She had faintly begun to hear the sound of gunfire in the distance. The cowboy rode back at full speed through the hail of bullets. Kara had mentally rehearsed this moment of confronting an attack countless times. She immediately instructed her family to take shelter in the basement. However, her granddaughter-in-law, Liz, grabbed a weapon and hid under a table in the downstairs living room. Cowboy Zane remained calm and composed, proceeding with the planned defense against the enemy. He directed Kara to the upstairs sniper position, where she was to use Jacob's large-caliber elk rifle to hold the high ground. By this time, the assassins on foot had entered the ranch. They opened the gates to let in the assassins in the vehicles. The cowboy finally rejoined his companions at the last moment.
Where's Sam?
Now, only 4 cowboys remained at Yellowstone Ranch. There was no time for grief, as the enemy vehicles were about to arrive. Zane made a swift decision, telling everyone to wait until the enemy got closer before firing, emphasizing the need to take out all 4 drivers first.
Not yet. Jasper, you take the lead car, Randy, you get the second car, Dennis the third, I get the last. Kill him!
A fierce battle was about to erupt. With the drivers killed, the vehicles came to a halt in the open. The assassins became exposed targets, forced to use the vehicles as cover. This gave the cowboys an initial advantage, and they quickly took down a number of the attacking assassins.
You were ready to get to the house and get on the roof. Go!
In the distance, 4 more vehicles arrived, carrying reinforcements for the assassins. This caused the 2 cowboys on the roof to feel a surge of fear. The disparity in numbers was too great. They likely would all die here. Zane and his companion then returned inside the house, where Kara upstairs was already prepared.
I had to do for this ranch.
This weathered old woman, having followed her husband Jacob to Yellowstone Ranch, had endured countless hardships and crises over the past 30-odd years. With their hearts united, the couple had overcome each challenge. She had long since honed remarkable and unflappable shooting skills. For a time, the 2 sides were locked in a stalemate. At that moment, at the Montana train station, Jacob was unaware of the desperate struggle his family was facing. The wealthy businessman decided to drop all pretense. Since the battle at Yellowstone Ranch had already begun, he simply allowed the assassins lying in wait at the train station to reveal themselves. Jacob counted them, a full 12 men. The moment Spencer stepped off the train, a fierce battle would inevitably erupt at the station, and Jacob had only brought 3 cowboys. Counting himself, there were only 4 of them. Fortunately, the sheriff had brought several plainclothes officers to assist Jacob. Alex had endured a day in the freezing wilderness. Her limbs were almost completely numb. She could only burn whatever flammable items she could find. Her heart was filled with sorrow, and she had resigned herself to dying there. Suddenly, she heard the distant rumble of a train, igniting a spark of hope for survival within her. She didn't know that her husband Spencer was on that train. To attract the train's attention, Alex immediately poured out her last bottle of liquor. The flames quickly grew, engulfing the car in a raging fire. The firelight and thick smoke caught the attention of the train engineer. Alex desperately cried out for help, but the train couldn't stop to save her. In the split second as the train passed by, Spencer could hardly believe his eyes. How could his wife be in Montana? Without a moment's hesitation, Spencer quickly ran to the rear of the train. To the astonishment of the conductor, Spencer leaped off. He jumped from the moving train to find Alex. Seeing the train disappear into the distance, Alex lost her last glimmer of hope. The forced strength that had kept her going completely collapsed, and she fell helplessly onto the snowy ground, weeping uncontrollably.
Spencer!
This couple, so steadfastly loyal to each other, who had unhesitatingly rushed towards one another, had finally been reunited under the grace of heaven after surviving near-death journeys. Alex was suffering from severe hypothermia. Spencer immediately picked her up. This was the land where Spencer had grown up. He knew the terrain intimately. He knew there was a house just a few miles away. However, the conductor, having seen a passenger jump off the train, had promptly notified the engineer. The train turned back to pick them up. Spencer immediately carried Alex to the medical car. The train conductor, a former Army medic, immediately began emergency treatment. The conductor had never seen such severe frostbite. Alex's limbs were already necrotic, but Alex was still incredibly relieved to finally see the Spencer she had yearned for. It was then that Spencer learned that Alex was pregnant with his child, but she was only a little over 6 months along. Her body had suffered severe frostbite, and she needed immediate medical attention to have any chance of survival for both her and the baby. However, the medical facilities on the train were limited. They would soon arrive at the Montana train station, and she had to be rushed to a hospital as soon as they disembarked. Back at Yellowstone Ranch, the battle was still raging. The cowboys and Kara held a significant advantage from their elevated positions, and any assassin who charged in was quickly taken down. This forced them to temporarily abandon their attack and turn to flee the battlefield. But Kara and Zane both knew that this safety was only temporary. Once night fell, the assassins would undoubtedly launch a second attack, and it would likely be much harder to defend against then. Their only hope was that Jacob would return with Spencer and more cowboys to provide reinforcements. The train carrying Spencer was about to arrive at the train station platform. The situation was fraught with danger. Jacob and the sheriff were on high alert. The moment Spencer stepped off the train, a bloody confrontation was inevitable. As the train's whistle signaled its arrival, the tension among Jacob and his men reached its peak. Banner, too, knew his fate was uncertain. He urged his wife and child to seize any opportunity to immediately board the train and leave. Gazing at the familiar train station, Spencer, with the instincts honed by war and years of hunting, could already sense the tense atmosphere on the platform. Many people there held weapons, and each one was visibly on edge. An uneasy feeling washed over Spencer. After scanning the crowd, he spotted Sheriff, a familiar face who was also on high alert. Spencer immediately drew his weapon, instructed the conductor to watch over Alex, and knew he had to go out and assess the situation himself.
Drop it! Drop it now! You do it now! Drop it!
Jacob and the sheriff, both seasoned fighters, returned fire decisively and without hesitation. Banner's wife, following his instructions, prepared to board the train amidst the chaos. Seeing people constantly being shot and falling, Banner's wife became panicked. She stumbled and fell at the train door. Spencer, unaware that Banner had murdered his brother, kindly helped Banner's wife and child onto the train. This act completely triggered Banner's conscience. Just then, officers from the Livestock Commission arrived. They were loyal to Yellowstone Ranch. The situation quickly turned against the assassins, and they began to flee in disarray. The battle was over, and Banner's life was coming to an end. Although he had experienced a last-minute change of heart, the crimes he had committed against Yellowstone Ranch were undeniable. In Banner's final moments, Jacob declared that their feud was over, promising to take care of Banner's wife and child, allowing Banner to pass away peacefully. Banner's life came to its end. Jacob went onto the train and finally met his nephew Spencer, whom he had been so anxiously waiting for. Jacob assessed the situation and found that his own men had suffered minimal casualties. The sheriff appeared to have only minor injuries, which relieved Jacob. The station was now littered with bodies and numerous wounded. So, the conductor made a decision to reroute the train to Bozeman, a nearby city with Montana's best hospital, where Alex and the injured needed immediate treatment. Spencer and his wife had just been reunited, and he had intended to accompany her to the hospital. However, Jacob had learned from Banner that another group of assassins was attacking Yellowstone Ranch. There was no time for Spencer to go to the hospital. By the time he returned, his home might be gone. Jacob had also been wounded by a bullet. So, the two men made an immediate decision. Jacob would accompany Alex to the hospital, while Spencer would head back to Yellowstone Ranch at once to lead the cowboys in a battle they absolutely could not afford to lose. Alex was naturally very reluctant to part with Spencer again, but Spencer's family duty left him no other choice. Alex supported Spencer's decision to return home to fight, but she made him promise to come back alive. With Alex's tearful farewells, Spencer and the cowboys got into their vehicles, putting the pedal to the metal as they sped towards Yellowstone Ranch. As darkness began to fall, the assassins grew bolder and more active. The cowboys and Kara remained vigilant, not daring to relax for a moment. They had no idea how Jacob and Spencer were faring and could only hope to hold out until the uncle and nephew returned. Having failed to breach the defenses during the day, the assassins had returned with a submachine gun. The suppressive fire prevented the cowboys from mounting an effective counterattack. They could only hide behind cover, afraid to peek out. The assassins even threw Molotov cocktails, intending to burn the house down. By this time, some assassins had already breached the ground floor. Zane was forced to retreat upstairs, fighting as he went. During the exchange, he was shot in the leg and could only huddle at the corner of the stairs for a last stand. The assassins had entered, and they hadn't noticed Liz. The women of Yellowstone Ranch were never cowards or weaklings. While Liz was reloading, Zane, limping and hobbling, went downstairs and took out the assassin. Meanwhile, the mastermind behind the entire operation, the wealthy businessman, was still confidently hosting an investment conference. After tonight, Yellowstone Ranch would be his. He had already launched his investment and development plans, acting as if the land was already within his grasp. Spencer finally arrived back at Yellowstone Ranch. He heard the gunfire from afar and immediately ordered the cowboys to turn off their headlights, accelerating rapidly into the heart of the battle. The cowboys at Yellowstone Ranch were barely holding on. The situation for the two on the roof was extremely perilous. They had no choice but to retreat back inside. A cowboy quietly told Kara that the assassins had already broken into the ground floor and there were many more outside. He feared they wouldn't be able to hold out much longer.
Wait.
Stop the car.
Spencer had dismounted and quickly joined the fight.
Spencer's here.
Tempered by countless battles, including his experiences in the war, a fight of this scale was something Spencer handled with ease. Spencer called out loudly, and Kara rushed to embrace her nephew, overcome with emotion. His skill and marksmanship left the cowboys, who arrived later, in awe. Jacob was not with Spencer, and Kara feared something had happened to him. When she learned that he had accompanied Spencer's wife to the hospital, Kara was surprised that Spencer even had a wife. There was no time for catching up, as her grandson Jack was still missing, filling Kara with a sense of foreboding. She immediately sent the cowboys to search along the road. Meanwhile, Alex was fighting her own battle. Her severe frostbite necessitated immediate amputation of her limbs. Moreover, her weakened state was causing her body to terminate the pregnancy. For the sake of the fetus, they had to induce labor prematurely. However, the doctors were uncertain if the premature baby would survive. They prepared Alex for the worst, but then a miracle occurred. The baby cried. Even the doctors were astonished. Alex immediately began breastfeeding, carefully nurturing the fragile little life. Jacob asked her to name the child. Ultimately, Alex chose the name John Dutton in memory of Spencer's deceased brother. The cowboys' search ended with the discovery of Jack, who had been dead for some time. Now, the next generation of the Yellowstone family consisted only of Alex's child, John Dutton. Spencer arrived at the hospital. Alex's condition was rapidly deteriorating, and it seemed she had little time left. This filled both of them with profound sadness. This ill-fated couple had never experienced a normal, peaceful life. They had finally found each other again, only to face imminent separation by death. Spencer stayed by his wife's side, but when he woke up the next morning, Alex had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Spencer, the hardened man of war, could no longer contain his grief and wept quietly. Spencer channeled his sorrow into fierce determination. The root of all their suffering was the ruthless businessman. Had he not waged war on Yellowstone Ranch, Spencer would not have lost his brother and sister-in-law, his young nephew Jack, and the woman he deeply loved, Alex. Now that the businessman's assassins had been almost entirely eliminated, with the remaining few scattered and fleeing,
You like it here?
when Spencer told him that his wife had been killed because of him, the businessman was bewildered, claiming he didn't even know Alex. But Spencer retorted that if the businessman hadn't started the war, he wouldn't have had to rush back, and Alex wouldn't have died. In Spencer's eyes, the businessman was still responsible.
Alex?
The uncle and nephew set fire to the businessman's mansion. For the next 45 years, no one dared to make a move against Yellowstone Ranch. Yellowstone Ranch temporarily returned to peace. Several more names were added to the family cemetery. So many members of the Yellowstone family had died protecting and expanding this land. After everything was over, Liz chose to leave Yellowstone Ranch. Kara didn't try to persuade her to stay, saying that Liz would surely find a new family someday, but Yellowstone Ranch would always be her home. Kara lovingly cared for and raised Spencer's son, John Dutton. Jacob retired, and Spencer took over as the head of Yellowstone Ranch. Spencer never remarried. Years later, he found a divorced woman who bore him a son. However, Spencer could never forget Alex and refused to give the divorced woman his name, ultimately leading to her leaving him with their son. Spencer's decision inevitably drew criticism, But he didn't care. Time passed and years flew by. Spencer grew old. His hair turned white. He often visited Alex's grave, staying there for the entire day. Until one day, Spencer peacefully passed away at Alex's grave, bringing his legendary life to an end.